Sorry, I'm just reading a notice that says low system resources may affect your audio quality. So if there is a problem, just unmute yourself and tell me, okay? Otherwise, we'll start. So there's the august gentleman himself, John Constable. John Constable was an English landscape painter in the Romantic tradition. Born in Suffolk, he is known principally for his landscape paintings, especially of Dedham Vale, an area of outstanding natural beauty surrounding his home on the Essex-Suffolk border, today known as Constable Country. It comprises about 12 square miles of the Stour Valley. He believed that along with a careless boyhood, it inspired his desire to paint landscapes. He once said, and I quote, "Painting is but another word for feeling." So Constable was born in East Bergholt. There's East Bergholt, you can see. His father was a prosperous corn merchant, and as a consequence of his family's relative prosperity, an allowance from the business helped Constable initially to supplement his meagre earnings as a painter. As a schoolboy, he attended Dedham Grammar School, there it is, where it said he distinguished himself more with his draftsmanship than his learning. However, his father decided he must learn the trade of a miller, and for a year he worked at the windmill at East Bergholt. Now we can see this windmill in the distance in this painting, painted from his father's kitchen garden, and there is the windmill. That's the windmill at East Bergholt. He later attended the Royal Academy schools in 1798, after his father had been persuaded to allow his son to paint professionally. And I should think if he saw this painting, he wouldn't take much persuading. Notice the gardener there doing a bit of hoeing, I should think, and the flat countryside. You could almost breathe the fresh air of this painting, I think. The young artist was initially influenced by the landscapes of Gainsborough and later by those of Claude Lorraine, such as his Lorraine's landscape with goat herd and goats. So this is not Constable painting, as you can see. This is a Claude Lorraine's painting, with a great influence on Constable. His influence can easily be discerned in both versions of Dedham Vale. The early one painted, this one that you're looking at now, painted in 1802, and a more accomplished and much larger painting, which he did in 1828, which we'll come to later. So there's an early John Constable painting. There's a church there. That could be, presumably that's Dedham Church. And as I say, he was heavily influenced by Claude Lorraine, as well as Gainsborough. It must be remembered that well into the 19th century, landscape painting was considered low-grade fare compared to history painting and portraiture, which was much favoured by the salons and fundamental to the teaching of the academies. However, Constable was convinced that there could be a moral dimension to landscape painting, which raised it to equal status with other genres, and this is what he aimed for. He considered it necessary for a natural painter, as he called himself, to commit to representing the beauty of the natural world. He was cautious of following the old masters slavishly, but he continued to learn from them. In 1802, he had a painting accepted by the Royal Academy, and this recognition spurred him on. He would paint on plein air, in the open, not just sketches like many of his fellow artists, but painting directly onto canvas. As much of the painting as he could do, it would be finished in the studio then. This was not at all easy at the time before oil paints appeared in tubes. Colours were carried in small sachets or pig's bladders and were pierced by a pin for access. Nonetheless, though extremely ambitious, finishing a painting outside in front of a natural scene was his ideal. However, Constable didn't just paint the natural environment. Here is an early watercolour seascape featuring the Victory, a year after the Battle of Trafalgar. Obviously, they've been repaired in the meantime. Not a particularly impressive painting, so it's a fair comment to say it's a good job he went back to landscape painting. During this early period, he relied on portraits to supplement his allowance. This is one of his very good friends, the Reverend John Fisher. We'll hear more of John Fisher later on. His uncle was the Bishop of Salisbury Cathedral. That's a very fine portrait, I think, showing a very determined, stolid personality. Very strong brow and nose. A church porch, this is called. This is a watercolour of East Berkholt Church. It's been suggested that he painted it to remind us of the passing of time with its setting sun, the three generations sitting there chewing the fat on the tombstones or by the tombstones, and the sundial high on the porch. It's not in great evidence in this painting. It's quite a small painting, 18 by 14, as you can see, but it is in the Tate if you happen to be in London and you want to see it closer, and they closer up, and they've got it on view. Of course, they don't have all their paintings on view by a long shot. In the letter, Constable hints at this intended symbolism. He says the motto on the dial is "Ut umbram sic vita," which translated means "life is a shadow." By now, Constable was becoming well known at the Royal Academy, but making very little money, so that when he fell in love with Maria Bicknell, he was unable to offer her marriage and maintain her in the social status she was used to. Her father was a solicitor working for the Admiralty. Constable was often made to feel unwelcome at her London home. Her family frowned on the relationship, and it was 8 years before they eventually married. Yet another striking portrait, I think, and a very fine-looking woman. It's quite small, it's only 12 by 10. I think I would have waited 8 years for that lady. Agricultural scenes largely dominated Constable's landscapes between 1810 and 1820. This is Dedham Vale, a morning scene. This was his largest exhibition painting to date and caused Constable much anxiety working from a series of sketches. If you look closely, he's included, we're told, 3 local churches of the Stour Valley, and I've only managed to spot 2 of them. I think that's one over there, and I think there's obviously a tower there. but I've looked hard and I can't see the third unless it's on that hill, maybe. But anyway, it's quite a large painting. It's almost just under 3 foot long by just over 4 foot. So if you were standing in front of it, you probably would pick them out quite easily. This painting was too undistinguished to impress and was also poorly hung in the exhibition in the Royal Academy. This next painting achieved far more success. Boys fishing. So this is a very typical Constable painting, as we're used to knowing Constable. We've got a lock here, a very old, dilapidated lock, feeding this canal basin. Well, I'm assuming it might be a pond, but it could be a canal basin. The rickety old bridge going over there. I don't think that's Willie Knott's cottage, the famous Willie Knott. And these two boys are sorting out their bait, I assume, although there is a fishing rod hovered over the water. And you've got a suggestion of wind in this movement in this painting. The wind is taking these trees and it's taking these branches on the extreme right as well there. It's quite a largest painting, it's 40 inches by nearly 50 inches. And this painting is in, as you can see, is in Anglesey Abbey. Then this one, painted in 1814, ploughing scene in Suffolk. This painting was produced in the studio, again from sketches. It seems that ploughmen were a late addition to the landscape. He's quoted as saying, "I have added some ploughmen from the park pales, which is a great help." Well, some ploughmen, but there's definitely one ploughman and he's busy ploughing, as you can see, but I'm not clear where the other ploughmen are. Perhaps you can see them. We're getting used now to Constable's famous skies. I'm not a great fan of Constable's clouds, to be perfectly honest, though some people seem to like them particularly, but they always look sketched in, as they probably were from sketches. They always have that sketched appearance, and they always seem to be dark. He uses plenty of texture. Anyway, we'll talk a bit more about those later on. Boat building. Now, Constable's father maintained a dry dock for boat repairs. This could be it. He needed horse-drawn barges to carry the corn ground at his mill at Flatford down the Stour to the estuary and then on to London. It's believed much of this painting was also done en plein air. But given the arrangement of the figures, it's obviously, experts consider it was obviously finished in a studio. It's well composed. So we've got the workman here doing something. He's sitting down at the stern of the boat doing something. Notice the steps into the dry dock there. And here he's got a fire going, melting, probably pitch for caulking, I would have thought. I'm no boat enthusiast myself, so I'm not sure about that. Vince would probably know more about that than I would. And then we've got various people dotted around doing bits and pieces as they might. And this very young person here, young girl, I should say, I don't know quite what she's up to. I don't know. She might just be disappearing to fetch their lunch or something. I don't know. Boats are always fun to paint because of their shape, of course. And this one, he's chosen to paint it from the end to from the stern to the bow, because that's the dry dock. Wivenhoe Park. This is near Colchester. It's a country house portrait. This was a genre not to Constable's taste, but it did bring him in commissions, and was a money earner for him. And he was good at representing gentlemen's parks, as he referred to them. You'll notice the house itself is mainly obscured by the trees. There's the house. You can hardly see the house. So if he was commissioned to paint that house, or if I'd commissioned him, I would be rather disappointed, I think, that it's in such low profile there. But the overall painting, of course, is very successful. I love this rickety old fence here. It's made up of sections. I should say, they were tied together by string, probably. That's a sort of fence that could be moved quite easily to allow the cows to have extra pasture and allow the grass to grow where they're not. And there's some boys fishing there, a bit of human interest, and a couple of swans. So it's a very peaceful scene. And here we have half the picture is taken up by the sky and Constable's clouds. And again, these clouds, there's more dark patches on them than light patches. The tops of them are catching the sun, but they're what I would call lowering skies, really. In 1815, both Constable's parents died. 1815 was the year of the Battle of Waterloo, to put it into perspective. And with his share of the inheritance, financial pressures were greatly relieved. He could now afford to keep Maria in the social status she was used to, and which her family had expected for her. They were married the following year after Constable explained to Maria, and this is curious, that the wedding would have to be deferred until he had finished his painting of Flatford Mill. He said he couldn't possibly leave East Berkholt until October of 1816. There's nothing like getting your priorities right, is there? We don't know how Maria reacted to this postponement of the wedding, but it's certain that her family neglected to attend. So they obviously still considered she was marrying beneath her. Unless, of course, they were mysteriously ill and had diplomatic illnesses. Constable and Maria honeymooned at his old friend John Fisher's home in Dorset. Now, we've already seen the portrait of John Fisher. And the artist took the opportunity to paint local scenes while there, such as this one of Weymouth Bay. The sketchiness of the clouds suggests it was done quickly on plein air, despite its largest size. It's 21 by 20. Again, threatening clouds there. He's also almost given them personality, these clouds. Like huge giants walking over the landscape. Perhaps I'm being too fanciful. This is Flatfoot Bill. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with this painting. It was also known as a scene on a navigable river, and it was exhibited in 1817 and was well received at the Royal Academy. The view looks towards the loch and the mill. The post of the old bridge over the river is in evidence here in this bottom left-hand corner, and you can see what's happening. This horse has been pulling the barge along the canal, and its services are now dispensed with. So you can see the rope is loose, and this boy is doing something with it. But the man on the barge on the extreme left here is punting. He's got a huge punt there, I suppose, for want of a better word, a pole anyway, and he's steering it. He needs to get under this bridge here. Now, for some reason, Constable is not interested in this painting, this bridge. That's why we only see this stanchion here. But this man is manoeuvring this boat so that it will swing round and go comfortably under the bridge. So Constable clearly is more interested in the scene as a whole, catching the trees and the sun and the field there, and the old fences. And it's what makes it a romantic painting. And then the houses, a small hamlet of houses there in the background. Well, be Flatford, I suppose. And these clouds are less imposing in this painting. It's mainly concentrating on trees and this kind old horse here who's just waiting patiently for the boys to finish what they're doing, and then he can go off and have his nose bag put on him, no doubt. So the river carried grain to the estuary and on to Harwich. I think I've already mentioned that. On the left, Constable also depicts a barge which has just been towed by the horse and about to be poled under the bridge, which I've just said that. X-rays have shown that the boy with the stick in the middle distance this is this boy here, was originally feeding a horse. And for whatever reason, Constable has painted him out. Too many horses, perhaps. The summers of 1816 and 1817 were the last time he painted at East Bergholt, and the last in which he painted the Suffolk scenery of his childhood. This painting is called The White Horse. You don't have to look far for the white horse there. It was the first to be painted on a 6-foot canvas, which was unusual for a landscape at the Royal Academy. It attracted a lot of attention. The Examiner's critic thought that it displayed, and I quote, greater fidelity to nature than any of his more celebrated contemporaries. On the back of its success, the artist was elected as an associate to the Royal Academy. In the painting, the white horse is being transported from one bank to the other. Presumably going to end up there, I would have thought. Yes, this painting is situated below Flatford Loch, which was indicated in the previous painting. But it's a standalone painting. It doesn't really matter. Constable seems to be more interested in depicting the commercial aspects of the Stour rather than the agrarian practices in this instance. Because of its size, he painted it in his Keppel Street studio in London using sketches made in the open air. It was simply not practical to paint outdoors on such a large canvas, as you can see. Again, Constable is very fond of his rickety old fences, and rotting wood. I take this building, this thatched building, to be a boathouse. And there are one or two characters on this boat, obviously going to lead the horse away. And as I said, I suspect the boat is actually aiming for this bit of this egress here, where the cattle are at the moment. The cattle would have to be shooed away, I suspect. And the clouds, typical Constable clouds again, they look sketched to me. They always seem to be jagged somehow. And we've always got this lowering dark cloud expressing the advent of rain at some stage. And notice how this house, or this building, these outbuildings, completely obscured by this tree, which is probably how it actually was, maybe, when he painted it. But you can barely see this building at all for the tree. The sun catches this one, so that's more in evidence. It's a very startling painting, though. Wonderful painting, I think. He repeated the success of the White Horse by painting another large canvas. This is Stratford Mill. The National Gallery guide tells us, and I'm going to quote from the guide now, Stratford Mill was a water-powered paper mill, now demolished, on the River Stour near East Berkholt and Suffolk. Constable shows the mill in shadow, while shafts of sunlight play between the trees beside the meandering river. A dying willow leans over the grassy water, and we glimpse a distant sunlit farmhouse. So that's what it's referring to. That's the willow, and there's the distant farmhouse catching the sun. A girl watches a boy cast his fishing line into the water, and it looks as though the angler to their left has just got a bite. So there's a bit of tension on that rod there, which is suggesting that he's got a bite. Another angler over there, and notice this rider here, the horse. He's painted the horse as though the horse is drinking from a tributary. And then there's the mill wheel there, cropped in the extreme left corner. So although this is Stratford Mill, there's very little mill to be actually seen in the painting. It's really, the painting is more about these fishermen, these two boys, and the fishermen there. And then on the other side of the river, we've got a boat there, and probably more fishermen, maybe. Oh, that's a barge, so possibly it's on a commercial enterprise. And notice how the sun catches the greens on the extreme right there, and also the greens here. So the sun is just piercing through the trees. This is another 6-foot painting, as you can see. Now financially secure with bequests from his father's estate, Constable and Maria moved to Hampstead while retaining his studio in London. Not unsurprisingly, he began to produce Hampstead scenes. This one is called Hampstead Heath, as you can see, painted in 1820. And he's painted it from a panoramic vantage point, so he's looking across, but he's also looking down. So there's plenty of human interest in this painting. These two labourers, agricultural workers, are dumping something. I'm sure it's legitimate fly tipping, but we don't know. Dumping something onto the heath there. We got a couple of donkeys over here, and there seems to be a thoroughfare with people are walking along. So it's a very peaceful scene. The sky not so lowering this time. There's plenty of sun in this scene. It's very bright. And this painting is in Cambridge, as it happens. Now we come to the most famous constable of them all, the Haywain. It's followed in 1821, originally entitled Landscape Noon, and yet another 6-foot canvas. He had sketched Willie Lott's house many times. There's Willie, the famous Willie Lott. We don't know what he looked like, Willie Lott, but I'm sure everybody's heard of Willie Lott's house. He was a tenant farmer born in the house, and it's said he never left it for more than 4 days in his entire lifetime. The cottage still exists, largely unaltered, but the trees obviously have gone. The view is to be found near Flatford Mill. The painting was well received by the Royal Academy, but curiously did not sell. And Constable eventually let it go to an art dealer in Paris. We're told Delacroix and Géricault much admired it, having given the opportunity to see it over there. And the painting was eventually awarded a gold medal by King Charles X, the French king. Had the French government been allowed to buy it, as they wished to, it would have ended up in the Louvre, of course, today. Apparently, we're told that the 3 horses have been stopped midstream to cool their legs. So that is, so the wain isn't stuck there. It's deliberately paused there on its way, well, across, trying to go across, although it must seems to be heading in that direction. So it's perfectly plausible that they've just taken allowed the horses to cross this narrow area of the river. I don't think we need to dwell too much on this painting because it's so well known to us, but I just make reference again to that black cloud up there, and we're going to see. So we're going to see eventually somebody takes issue with Constable's black clouds. In 1821, he began work on another 6-foot canvas, view of the Stour near Dedham. In all these landscapes, Constable paid particular attention to the skies. This sky here is not so well defined, but we've got that black cloud, which in either corner, really, but that's particularly black. This is painted in blue. So this is typical a Stour painting of Constables. We've got the rickety old bridge there. I think we've seen that before, but we were on the other side of the bank when we were looking at that. And there's the man with his pole manoeuvring his barge. There's a horse over there which may have been pulling one of the barges. We've got a sail here on this boat, and notice the sail there. And the sail there in the middle ground is powered by it. Well, it's full bellied. It's powered by wind, so there's a suggestion of some wind there, I would say. Whereas they look becalmed in this area where the 2 boats are alongside each other. It's not quite clear what they're all doing. There's another man there, possibly with a pole. He might be pushing against the bank, possibly. We don't know. But it's full of interest. It's full of detail. It's full of interest, and it's very atmospheric. And you can see why it's firmly in the Romantic tradition. As far as the skies are concerned, he said the sky was not only the most difficult part to paint, but it dictated the standard of the scale. And in his words, the organ of sentiment, he called it, the device through which he could convey mood. Now, in 1823, he painted Salisbury Cathedral for his friend John Fisher's uncle, who was the bishop there. But the bishop objected to the dark cloud on the right of the picture. So there we are. It's not as obvious as other dark clouds that we've seen, but anyway, the bishop didn't like it. So, so Constable, rather than retouching the original, painted the cathedral again without the offending cloud. So this is the original one, I would suggest, and this is when the one he's painted again. It's much lighter sky behind. Constable later admitted he found the cathedral the most difficult subject he had hitherto painted, which is hardly surprising. Look at the detail. The cows are in pretty much the same place, so he's copied the original. And these two characters walking along, and this man who's pointing it out with his walking stick to the lady. He's doing the same in the other painting as well. So it's a fair representation of the original. Personally, I would have painted out the dark cloud. I'm sure Rob would agree. The lock followed in 1824. This is Dedham Lock near Flatford Mill. It sold on the first day of hanging at the Royal Academy for 150 guineas. So we've got the bargees working. He's working the lock there. I'm not an expert on locks. They seem to make sense when I look at them, but I'm not sure whether this lock whether he's opening this lock or whether he's closing it. Presumably he's opening it so that I don't know. I really don't understand, but the water needs to rise in the lock here for this boat to come through, I suspect, and be on the same level. Or maybe the other lock gates are on the left, and that water has got to drop down to be the same level as this one. I'm not sure. There's a church tower in the background there, and the dark clouds again. He can't resist painting dark clouds. I suppose it's a device for letting the sun come through spasmodically and pick out certain items. I mean, the green there is quite virulent, and it's picking out the bargee's jacket there, and the ripples on the water. In the same year, Maria began to show signs of tuberculosis, and this occasioned a period of convalescence at Brighton, where he painted this small sketch, Brighton Beach, with colliers. Now, I assume colliers refers to these boats, so presumably they're coal-carrying vessels. It's very small. This is only 6 inches by 10 inches, and you can see it's ripped out of a notebook there on the extreme right. So it must have been a sketch pad that he was using. It was eventually worked up to this painting, Chain Pier at Brighton. So there's the Chain Pier right in the middle of it. It's quite choppy seas there, and there's plenty of activity on the beach. Pulling in nets, maybe. Not quite sure what they're doing. There's Brighton front with all the hotels. And the dark clouds. Again, it was not generally liked, mainly because of the inclement weather it portrayed. I'm not surprised at that. His great friend Fisher advised him, let in sunshine and serenity. It will be then the best sea painting of the day. The mood of the painting and its lowering skies may be accounted for by the recent loss of Constable's wife to TB, despite these continual periods of convalescence at the resort. Here's another mill scene. The mill at Gillingham, Parnham's Mill. Constable described the mill as wonderful, old and romantic. And this painting he described as one of my best pictures. It's not a 6-foot canvas, this one. It's 21 by 17. But there we've got a good portrait or landscape of a working mill. Notice the human element in it, this lady or girl or maid washing in the river, and this one disappearing into the door, through the door into the side of the building. And then he's captured the water coming off the wheel, with bright flecks of white paint, and also on the river itself. And I like his yellow ochres in the building, and they contrast well with the dark reds, the madder browns. But yet again, we've got the dark clouds up there, but this time it's letting the light come in from the left-hand side, and we got the suggestion of a rainbow there. Notice how these two trees are sort of leaning to each other. It's almost giving them some sort of personality. The cornfield. Constable seems to be aiming for the picturesque here. It abounds with telling detail. The donkey and the foal, the sheep being herded by the dog, the boy drinking from the stream, the dilapidated fences, the abandoned plough, there's the abandoned plough, the broken gate, the field of ripe hay, it's quite tall, the hay there, you can see. All designed to tease the viewer's focus, so you don't know what to look at first, basically. Look at this old rickety fence here, or what's left of it. Hardly a fence at all. It's not doing any work now. And then, of course, the trees and the clouds and the black cloud in the corner there. It wouldn't be a Constable painting without that black cloud. This painting is in the National Gallery. It's quite a large painting. It's 4 foot by 5 foot, I would have thought. It's late July, and Constable went out of his way to acquire advice from the botanist Henry Phillips about what would abound then, for example, cow parsley and brambles. The scene has been identified as Fen Lane, leading from East Berkholt to Dedham. Constable would have passed along this route many times on his way to school. Though it was highly revered at the Royal Academy, it didn't find a buyer. Thackeray later described the painting thus: under an influence of a late shower, the shrubs, trees, and distance are saturated. One cannot but admire the manner in which the specific character of every object is made out. The undulations of the ripe corn, the checkered light on the road, the freshness of the banks, the trees and their leafage, the brilliant clouds artfully contrasted against the trees, and here and there broken by azure. Those are Thackeray's words. To what extent he was an art critic, I don't know. Constable's major submission to the Royal Academy in 1828, and to which I've already referred to much earlier on, was Dedham Vale, showing the influence of Claude Lorraine again. It's a much larger painting than the other one I showed you. Both brush and palette knife are in evidence here, resulting in some of the foreground being difficult to interpret. Notice the homeless mother and child huddled. See, you'll just see the red of her cape there. She's almost part of the landscape. Huddled around a cauldron outside a makeshift shelter. It's a curious inclusion in what is at heart a romantic landscape, possibly influenced again by the Claude Lorraine, as I've said. So there's the human interest. And there's the church tower that keeps popping up every so often. The extent of Constable's grief following the death of Maria is often used to explain the gloominess of his later buildings. Later paintings, I should say. Well, buildings in the paintings. This is Hadley Castle. The wildness of the landscape and turbulence of the angry sky convince us of sadness. It was worked up from a pencil sketch he made of the castle in 1814. It's a large painting. There is also a full-scale preliminary sketch of the painting in the Tate. This painting, as you can see, is in America. The sky is very busy there. A lot of texture in that sky. This is a small sketch of Old Sarum, only 6 by 9 inches. It was painted in the same desolate mood, since desolation is what is surely expressed here. Constable wrote of it, the present appearance of Old Sarum, wild, desolate, and dreary, contrasts strongly with its former greatness, for it was here that our earliest parliaments on record were convened. In the same year, 1829, Constable was finally elected to the Royal Academy. It was a not inconsiderable achievement, perhaps overdue for a landscapist, as there were many painters of the preferred genre of history also in contention. In 1830, he painted the Glebe Farm. Constable hailed this work as one of the pictures on which I rest my little pretensions to futurity. That word futurity is, we would substitute with posterity these days, of course. It's a word that's gone out of use. He painted it to commemorate the death of Dr. Fisher, the Bishop of Salisbury, whose first ministry was at Langham, where this cottage stood. So that's where he was. That's where he was born. Oh, no, not where he was born. That's where his first ministry was. But I don't know whether that was a vicarage or. The following year, he painted and exhibited Salisbury Cathedral again. That's a very different painting of Salisbury Cathedral. He painted again. It's a nude painting, I think. It's dark, dour. The cathedral is bathed in dark light. What light is coming through these angry clouds. And this curious rainbow there. Not much colour in that rainbow. But what light he allows to pierce the clouds is picked up in the river, and we've got a wain again with 3 horses. Are they cooling their feet again here? No, I suspect they're they're actually crossing over onto this land here, maybe, I don't know. And one of Constable's rickety fences is in this bottom right-hand corner. He just loves to paint these old, worn, time-weary timbers. This is a large painting, 61 by 38. We've got a dog here who's interested in the wain or cart being pulled along. And we've got a church there on the extreme left in the distance. This painting it's said this painting is full of metaphor. The dark clouds are taken to express the coming of Catholic emancipation and the spectre of political reform. Yet there's also light in the painting, signifying the end of the storm. The rainbow begins at his friend's house, now Archdeacon Fisher, the bishop's nephew. We saw earlier a portrait of him. A row broke out between Constable and Turner over the position of the hanging of this painting in the 1831 Royal Academy exhibition. It was hung in preference to one of Turner's, and he didn't like it. Constable was that year responsible for the hanging, and apparently it's said he switched them at the last minute. Today, the two paintings are displayed side by side. Not the first time Constable and Turner are going to fall out. The opening of Waterloo Bridge on June the 18th. It was begun in 1819. Constable worked on this painting until 1832. The painting shows the Prince Regent about to board the royal barge at Whitehall Steps. But you'll be thrilled to see where that is. It's very much done in an impressionist style, with clicks of colourful paint here, there, and everywhere. I can just make out a man there cheering with his hat in his hand, but I'm not sure where the royal barge is. I did think it was this daub here, but I'm not sure that it is now, to be honest. I've given up on this painting, to be perfectly honest. The Lord Mayor's barge is situated prominently in the right foreground, we're told. Its red standard leading the eye back to the pale horizontal line of the bridge and the dome of St. Paul's. Well, we can see the bridge. There's the bridge and the dome of St. Paul's. So this must be the royal barge on the basis of that description. Beyond the left-hand end of the bridge is Somerset House. So there's Somerset House, gives us some context. The home of the Royal Academy. Not Burlington House, where it is now. Constable was never pleased with this painting and needed much encouragement to complete it. It occasioned yet another spat between Constable and Turner on varnishing day. Constable's painting was hung alongside Turner's more muted landscape, Helvoetsluy. I haven't got a copy of that painting. Turner didn't like the competition and placed a large red daub on his grey sea to make the London painting pale by comparison. Constable was heard to comment, "He has been here and fired the gun." Actually, I don't know how many of you have seen the film with Timothy Spall playing Turner, but that incident is faithfully recorded in the film. The Valley Farm is Constable's last painting set in the Stour Valley. Again, we have a picture of Willie Lott's house at Flatford. Willie Lott lived in this house for 80 years, and we've already seen how he never left it but for 4 days. The Tate tells us there is a development towards looser and more expressive handling of paint in this painting. The surface of the canvas is heavily worked, and Constable has applied flecks of white paint to bring the picture to life. Now, I'm indebted to Roger, who's pointed out to me that a gentleman by the name of Patrick Trevor Roper has written a book looking at, I think he's an ophthalmologist, and he's written a book where he looks at the paintings of many great painters and detects that they've got a degree of colour blindness towards the end of their life. He suggests Constable could have been red-green colour blind. That's how he puts it. So greens are overloaded with red to pep them up, and broken colour to avoid mixing it with his famous white flecks. Constable's Snow, it's called. I mean, we got to expect all artists to suffer from poor eyesight towards the end of their life. Monet in particular comes to mind. So there we've got a typical, these look like cows in front of this boat here. I don't think they're not horses pulling the boat. They're cows, surely. And this man is using a punt to move it around. And there's Willie Lott's house again, as I've said. This painting was sold for £300, the largest price Constable ever received for a picture. He continued to work on the painting, even after it had been sold. And many considered it that he'd overworked it and detracted from the original freshness. Unfortunately, it's not a very clear painting, but that's the best I could come up with Google Images. Constable was now plagued with rheumatism, which made it painful for him to hold a brush and difficult to paint on large canvases. He was devoted to the paintings of Sir Joshua Reynolds and produced this painting as a tribute, a cenotaph to the memory of Sir Joshua Reynolds. We see the busts of Raphael and Michelangelo, whom Reynolds considered to be the embodiment of the grand style. It's said that the deer is a sop to Constable's favourite play, As You Like It. So this doesn't actually exist anywhere. It's all in Constable's imagination. But he's just imagining that this could be a monument to Sir Joshua Reynolds. And there are the two artists. There's one and there's the other, either side. This is his last painting, Arundel Mill and Castle. And he was working on this painting at the time of his sudden death, which was believed to be as a result of a heart attack. When he saw the castle earlier in his life, while staying with a friend, he said that he never saw such beauty in natural landscape before. There's the castle and a promontory there. Though unfinished, it was considered far enough advanced to be shown at the Royal Academy posthumously. So I'll just let you look at that painting a moment, because that's the last Constable painting that we're going to look at this morning. And the sky seems to be behaving itself at the moment. It's quite a bright sky, which is letting all this light in, which makes it such a colourful painting. So John Constable was buried with his wife Maria in the grounds of St. John's Church in Hampstead.